Good morning and welcome to our Pisgah Sunday reflection for the 25th of April. It's the fourth Sunday after Easter and we're going to be looking together at one of the great classic texts. It's John 10, 1-16, the Good Shepherd. Maybe you just want to grab your Bibles, press pause now, and then we can read it together. Truly, truly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hears his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus said to them again, Truly, truly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own knows me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep, but are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. Amen. When I first moved to Pembrokeshire, I was told that the county possessed some of the best beaches in the UK, the cleanest air, but also some of the dodgiest of tradespeople. Now, to be fair, that hasn't been my experience. Finding a tradesman who will come when they say they're going to come, now that can be a bit more difficult, but the ones who have come and done work for us have been really, really good. But I met a lady last week who seems to have an unhappy knack of choosing the wrong uns. She bought this big property which she was doing up, and as such has had to use an awful lot of different people. It started off the problems with the double glazing. She chose a nationwide company, a big Welsh company, a company you've probably heard of, the one that often comes knocking on your door and telling you they're working in your area, and they've got some fabulous discounts they can offer you. Well, she chose this thinking she'd be safe with a bigger company. Well, they came along and the fitter, a really nice chap, she said, he was removing her patio doors, but as he was doing so, some of the masonry to the side started to come away. He looked a bit panicked, confessed he was out of his depth. So he rang his boss. His boss was very offhand with him and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Just shove it back in, use some gaffer tape if you have to, then put the frame in the way. The customer will never know." But of course, the customer was standing beside the fitter during the phone call, and the phone was on loudspeaker. And the poor fitter was apparently mortified and incredibly apologetic. This experience was followed up by a dodgy landscape gardener. For the first few days, he made remarkably little progress on the gardening project. She'd come home from work and he'd explained that there was an unexpected stone under the ground that took an awful lot of shifting, or old tree roots that are as hard as iron. On the fourth day, she came home early from work. And there he was in the middle of the garden, spread out, just his shorts on, going golden in the sun and snoring loudly. So she crept around the garden, putting all his tools away in the van. And then she crept up to him, wrote a note that said, "You're fired," and put it on his chest, and then crept in the house and locked all the doors. And when about 20 minutes later he came knocking on the doors, she refused to answer them. And she spoke about others too. There was a plumber who had come to sort of heating out and to drain all the system, but didn't possess a radiator key. There was a carpenter who didn't seem to use a spirit level, and so on and so on. Now, all of these tradespeople, or in the case of the double glazing people, the boss, they all seem to lack one thing, and that's integrity. They weren't there to do a good job, it seemed. They were just looking for themselves. Well, experiences like dealing with tradespeople was something that Jesus' listeners would have been familiar with. Okay, slightly different trades and jobs, but they'd have still understood what it was like to try and find a good worker and how difficult that could be and the danger of being ripped off. So Jesus would use everyday issues like this to communicate to his listeners really important and profound truths. And it was incredible, really, how he used these stories, because you don't need a PhD in theology to understand Jesus. He doesn't use lots of obscure or technical language, and yet he takes such profundity and translates it to the simple, or at least the simple to understand. Perhaps if Jesus had come in our time, he'd have told the story of the good plumber or the good landscape gardener, and we'd have related in the same way as they did with this story of the shepherd. Because in an agricultural society, particularly an ancient agricultural society, shepherds were very numerous and very important. And apparently, getting a good, reliable shepherd was as hard as finding hen's teeth. Poor shepherds who lacked integrity were far more interested in their wages than they were the welfare of their sheep. And shepherding could be an incredibly dangerous business. Just Google ancient shepherds and read about it, and you'll find that they had to tackle mountain lions with just slingshots and sticks. They had to fight off bandits. And many shepherds who didn't flee for the hills when danger came actually lost their lives. As Jesus put here, they lay their lives down for the sheep. But most shepherds wouldn't get to that point. They'd just run off and leave a flock to it. So good shepherds were highly prized. In our address today, we're looking at three aspects that the good God shepherd brings into our lives. We're looking at these aspects partly so we can recognize him more readily, but also so we can recognize those who authentically come in his name, his true ambassadors, if you like. And so the Good Shepherd offers 1, goodness and integrity. 2, life. And 3, relationship. But we're going to start off by looking at his goodness. There are 2 words for good that were in the Greek language. The most common good word that was used in an everyday context in a way that we would use, could say, was called agathos. And it simply means decent, capable, and moral. Now there's another word, it's called kalos. And interestingly, this was the word that Jesus used for the Good Shepherd, not the more common agathos. Now kalos entails everything that agathos does, but it adds to it beauty, perfect goodness, praiseworthiness. It elevates merely good to a state of godliness. So the good shepherd that Jesus is referring to isn't like some bloke down in the pub who is being recommended as a decent shepherd you might want to hire. No, this is the ultimate example of a shepherd. A shepherd so infused with love for his sheep that he's willing to lay down his life, literally give himself to the wolves so that his sheep don't have to die. So, okay, Jesus is telling this story to a group of people to show them that they've got a choice. There are different kinds of shepherds to choose from. It's clear that the listeners are supposed to relate to the sheep in the story. But who are the shepherds? We know who the good shepherd is. It's Jesus. But who are the false shepherds competing for a slice of the flock to get their attention? Well, most scholars believe that this good shepherd story or teaching that Jesus delivers is actually in response to the events that happened in the chapter before in John. So in John 9, there's a situation that occurs and it leads Jesus to tell this story, which informs us, his opinions, if you like, on that story. Now, if you've got the time, by all means, press pause, look up John 9 and read the story for yourself. But just to give you a really brief summary, in it, Jesus heals this blind man, a man who's been blind from birth. All his friends, all his neighbours are utterly shocked that this man can now see. They take him to the priests, to the Pharisees, and rather than being really happy and celebrating that this sheep of God has now been healed, they're infuriated. Partly because the healing was done on the Sabbath, breaking the traditional law, but also because it demonstrates that the Jesus who did it has a power that they don't possess. So they're feeling jealous. That power base, that little kingdom that they've been building for so long, it's being threatened, or they perceive it as being threatened, because Jesus will be perceived as a greater teacher than they are. And this man represents Jesus's power in his healing. And so I'm not going to go into the details now, but to cut a long story short, they exclude him from the place of worship. They say, you're no longer a part of us. Now, Jesus finds this man. He goes, he finds it, and he demonstrates to him that even though he's been expelled from the human religious institution, he's actually now, he belongs more now than he ever did before. Despite the expulsion, he's no longer isolated. He's a beloved sheep of God, the shepherd God. He's very precious and he matters to God. So this tale, that what happened in John 9 and in the story that Jesus tells afterwards, helps us to see the difference between dodgy human religious institutions, religiosity that's legalistic and cold and unloving, and true people and places of faith. Dodgy human religious institutions put the institution and themselves first before the sheep. But true faith demonstrates a love whereby it puts the sheep first. Its love puts the needs of the flock before its own. And that's how you can tell the difference Jesus is simply showing us. But of course, false shepherds, they're not just religious. There's all sorts of shepherds looking for our attention. Some can be secular. It can be ideas. It can be philosophies. It can be celebrities. It can be attitudes. I guess the most obvious clue as to whether a shepherd is false or not is their preoccupation. False shepherds tend to be preoccupied by their own wealth, their own glory, self-proclaiming themselves, by their status, by a hierarchy. It's like the snake oil salesman in the Wild West movies. They make big claims. They seem to offer easy answers, like buy to be happy. Look like this, be this size if you want to have any kind of worth in the world. Vote for me and your life will be wonderful. It'll all be okay. Some of the most common church examples include one or two high-profile ministers who have become extremely rich by talking about the health, the wealth and prosperity that potential disciples can have, but neglecting to tell them that Jesus also said, pick up your cross and follow me. Following Jesus can be really, really hard. Caring about the things that the shepherd cares for can be difficult. Sometimes it can make us incredibly unpopular. Like the example of the German pastors during the Nazi days, when many of them were imprisoned because they refused to listen to the claims of the false shepherds at the time. Another little story, I know a church, I know of a church from my previous days that used to have a big soup kitchen in its sanctuary. It stopped the soup kitchen because one or two members were really upset that people were spilling food on the floor, that it was smelly on Sundays, and so they stopped the soup kitchen. But isn't that frighteningly similar to the story of a blind man, the vulnerable man being excluded from a place of worship because he just didn't fit? If you take away the Good Shepherd from any faith, person or institution, you're just leaving it a religious, cold husk. The Good Shepherd's not there. He's off looking for the marginalised sheep. The lost sheep is left for 99 and he's gone looking for the lost one. But he's not going to be in the place where the sheep are not cared for, or in the person where the sheep are not cared for. I saw an animal fact once. I read about it in a commentary. I don't know if it's actually true. I've got no experience of sheep. But this commentator once claimed that sheep are the only animal that when they're being taken to market, when they're being taken to slaughtered, don't actually sense their impending doom. Now, if that is true, then it makes them a particularly apt illustration for us human beings. How often have I rushed into headlong, stupid situations without really thinking about it, sensing the danger? How often have I let myself get swayed by persuasive arguments or self-rationalizations? I know that I really need a shepherd. Now let's go on to the second thing that the Good Shepherd brings, and that's life. Some church illustrations do the rounds. I've heard this particular illustration used numerous times by different preachers to describe something of what the Good Shepherd does for us. So you probably heard the ancient sort of stories of shepherds taking the lamb of a ewe, a lamb that's died, taking the skin of the lamb, placing it on an orphaned lamb, and then using that to enable the bereft ewe to welcome the new orphaned lamb in to suckle on her. And in the same way, Jesus could be described as the one who allowed himself to die to cover us with his righteousness so that we too can live. His goodness literally hiding our guilt, our shame, all the embarrassing, yucky, horrible parts of our lives, our behaviours and attitudes. And all God sees is Jesus covering us. Back to the theme of life, let's examine what it means then. Jesus promises life, but he doesn't couch this promise with all sorts of slick lies to persuade us. We don't get the old double glazing, slick talk. He's being real with us. Yes, on the one hand, he's saying, I am life. I'm the only way to life. I want to give you life. But he's being disarmingly honest by saying it can be really hard though. It won't be an easy road. Pick up your crosses and follow me. It's not the sort of thing that an advertising executive like Saatchi and Saatchi might use to promote a politician, say. You couldn't imagine Mr. Johnston, Mr. Starmer or Ms. Sturgeon saying to folks, follow me, pick up your crosses. Ours is the better way. Saying to your voters that it's going to be really, really, really painful to vote for me, even though it's ultimately good, isn't generally a vote winner. Jesus is saying it's going to be hard taking up your crosses, but it will be worth it. It's the road to life. Now, John's Gospel is littered with descriptions of life, and I just want to give you a few of them before we move on. In John 1-4, we see that Jesus is the absence of darkness. Jesus is life. In him was life, and the life was the light of the world. In John 3:1, we see that his road is harder, but it leads to a sure and permanent destination. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but have eternal life. In John 11:25, we see that the life's can be hard, but it leads ultimately to hope. Because he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, may live. And in John 17:3, we see that life is having something to hang on to. It's an assurance for us. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. Just throw one more in, John 20:31. But these are written so that you may believe, and that through believing you may have life in his name. And you know, life isn't just something that we get when we die. It's not just eternal life. It's not just something after this life. Life is something that begins now. And so we come to our third word, relationship. In today's text, this relationship is described as the sheep knowing the voice of their shepherd. Sheep might be a little bit daft, but you've got to give them that. They know the voice of the one who feeds them, who leads them, whom they follow. I've been blessed by hearing that voice on a number of occasions in my life, or through my life. Sometimes it's been very overt, almost supernatural in the way it's expressed itself. At other times it's been the still, small voice. But the trouble with the still small voice is it can be so blocked out, and there have been points in my life where it has been blocked out by my preoccupations, by my worries, by my concerns, by my consumerism, by the media, by stuff, and yet more stuff. As an example, I've used this before, but it always comes to me when I think of the still small voice. When I was a little boy, I was given my first wind-up watch, and I was so proud of this wind-up watch. It was wonderful. I would proudly wind it up at the start of every day. I would listen to it ticking. I'd hold it on my wrist and sort of kind of hold it in such a way that people can see my proper grown-up wind-up watch. And so I was so devastated on the day that I lost my wind-up watch. I was inconsolable. I pulled apart the whole house looking for my watch. My mum helped me, my whole family helped me, but I went to bed that night so upset because I'd lost my watch and it appeared to have gone forever. And slowly as I lay there, grieving for my watch, as my little boy mind started to calm and as sleepiness came upon me and the noise of my emotions began to dim, suddenly it became quiet enough to hear the soft ticking, tick, tick, tick. And I was able to use that ticking to look behind the little cabinet beside my bed and see that the watch had fallen down behind it. Can you hear that still, small voice? There are lots of voices, lots of noises, lots of shepherds, all vying for our attention. Listen to me, I'm over here, I'm just what you need. Follow me, it'll be so easy, it'll be so big and splendid. Can you hear the good shepherd? Can you recognize his voice in the way that the sheep can recognize their shepherd in the story? It's hard to hear sometimes. I've already spoken about the things that can distract us, that can preoccupy us. But Samuel, the prophet, the one we read about in the Old Testament, he was once given some excellent advice. He was advised on a prayer he could pray. And this is what he prayed. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. And I don't think we can go too far wrong if we apply that prayer to our lives. But don't just say it as a bunch of words. Say it like we really mean it. Do you really want to hear the voice of the shepherd in your life now? Guiding you, advising you, comforting you, leading you? If you do, let's pray that prayer together now as we end. Speak, Lord. Your servants are listening. Open up our ears, open up our minds, open up our hearts. Help us to discern your voice and to know your will and way. And Lord, help us to have that relationship with you. Amen. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening. May God bless you hugely in the week ahead. And God willing, I'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.